Good morning,
Good
Rabbi.
morning. Good morning, Zelig. Great to be back.
Yes.
Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos, Ma'acholois, Asuros, prakim, Beis, Gimel, and Dalet, starting with Perek Beis. After we learned in the opening chapter of all of the basic simanim of all different types of foods, today in Perek Beis, we're going to learn the Geder, the definition of the Isur. As we'll see, Aleph, it's Asur, Macholas Asuras, Mitzad, Elav, Haba, Mechlal Aseh. And also there's a explicit lav for which we get malchus. We're going to learn the shiur for which you're going to get this punishment min ha-Torah. And we're mamash going to go through all different types of foods that are ma'acholis asures. Perek Beis has 24 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Michlal shenemar, since the Torah writes v'chol behema mafreses parsa v'shoisa'as shesha shtei parosos, which is the sign number 1. In other words, the foot has to be divided into 2 hoofs, and it also has to be a mahalas geda behema. And the Torah writes only those animals you may eat. So that's a positive statement. So from that we can infer shemeya ani shekol she'ena mahalas geda or mafreses parsa, that an animal that does not have these two simanim, they are asura. This is a classic lav haba michlal asei, which has the level of a prohibition of an asei. If this would have been the only comment the Torah would have made regarding forbidden foods, then, for example, if someone, God forbid, would violate and eat something that may not be eaten, they would not get malchus. But on top of that, but since uba gomel, uba chazet, uba arneves, uba shofen, when it comes to the 4 animals, which are the only 4 animals that only have one of these 2 simanim, which is the camel, the pig, let's touch arneves as a rabbit, even though there are many other translations, and the shofen and the hare. The Torah writes that even though it has one sign but not the other, the Torah writes clearly don't eat it. That macholis asuris are also prohibited under a classic lav. Meaning, like this pasuk writes, even though it has one of the 2, since it doesn't have both of the simanim, nevertheless, the Torah writes, beferish, don't eat it. So it's good to know that. In other words, the isur of machalas asura is sai mitzad alav haba michlal asei and pashat alav. Now, even though the lav is only regarding an animal that only has one of the 2 simanim, so the Rambam writes, the kol shcheim shar behema temeya and chaya temeya. She'ein basimin klal, she'isar achilasa is also a side of the lav above michlal asei, also the lois aseh, yoser al asei above michlal, oisot echelu. Now we have a lav. So says Rambam, halacha beis, lefikach kol ha'oichel mibsar behema, or chayet, which is tameyam. Now let's go into shiurim. Now, how much must one eat in order to be punished in a human court? So the classic shear when it comes to food is a kazayis, then like him in a toidam, and that's bein sha'achal min habasar, bein sha'achal min hachelev. All right. What's very important is to know that by a behema tohira, as we mentioned yesterday, unlike a chaya, there is another isur of chelev. The Rambam is saying that since in a behema temeya, you b'chlal can't eat it. There is no specific isur chelev. But the fats, the chelev of a behema temeya is not different than any other part of the behema temeya, for which, if a person eats a kazayis or more, they're going to be chayiv malchus. Now, just to make it clear, as the Rambam is going to write explicitly many times, right, the machlokes between Rabbi Zajac and Reish Lakish, whether chatzi shir is asur min ha-Torah, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Zajac that even less than the shir is prohibited biblically. To make that clear, Elama malchus you only get if you have the shear of a kezayis. Halacha gimel ha'adam. I think it's called a cannibal, or tragically sometimes people that's the only thing left to eat. So a person, a human being, afal pishenamar. Vayhi ha'adam lenefesh chayam. A person is a chaya mitanefesh. So you would think, we're called a chaya. Einoi bechlal mine chaya ba'ala sparsa. We don't put. We're not in the category of a creature that can have split hooves or won't have split hooves. In other words, we're not included in this whole parsha, and therefore this law that we mentioned doesn't go to eating a flesh of a human being, but the ha'oichel mibsar ha'adam, or from the fats of an adam, bein min ha'chai, bein min ha'meis, the person won't be chayiv malchus. So hold on. So you would think, what does that mean? Does it mean it's not b'chlal forbidden biblically? No, it is asur midoraisa. Aval asur hu ba'asei. Sharei, where do we infer it from? The Torah counts the 7 types of chayas. Again, the havamina is that since the Torah calls us in the creation of man lenefesh chaya, so mizanat chaya. No, the Torah writes zois chaya asher toichlu, and the Torah counts, as we learned, right? The 7 types of chayas. Kol shahu chutz mehen, anything that's not one of the 7 enumerated. Lo yisoichlu. So here we have it's also mitzad asay, it's also midoraisa, but there is no chiyuv malchus. Halacha dalet. Next, ha'oichel ksayis. Again, that's the minimum share. Mipsar oif tamei. Loikim in atayda shenemad ve'ezet shaktzu min ha'oif. The Torah writes clearly lo yei ochelu. And also harei avar alasei, because the Torah says kol tzipor Torah yes toichelu, which implies ha'tameya lo yisoichlu. Here also you have a befedish alav. Shenemar, as it says, v'sheketz yiolachem ibsadam, clearly lo yisoichelu, and also v'avar Allah say shenemar koil asher yeshlei koil asher lo yisnapir v'kaskeses. Only those fish should you eat, which implies machlal she'en lo yisnapir v'kaskeses lo yeyachel. So halamadato shekol ha'oichel dog tamei oy behema v'chaya tameya oy oif tamei. That's the Rambam is making as a synopsis. Aleph bitul mitzvah say, and beis v'avar alois say. So eating human flesh is different by the fact that it's also only mitzad and asay and not mitzad alav. Halacha hey chagav tamei harei b'chlal sheretz ha'oif. So now we already have an asay and alav, right? So therefore v'oichel kasais misheretz ha'oif. Now, how do you define a sheretz ha'oif? Unlike a bird, no, we're speaking about a sheretz ha'oif. He teaches here in the English, a flying, teeming animal. So here are the examples: a fly, a mosquito, a hornet, a bee, and the like. Now, halacha vav. Ha'oichel kizayis misheretz ha'aretz. What sheretz ha'aretz again in English, a teeming animal of the land, as the Rambam will give other examples. Loike shenemar b'chol sheretz hashoyretz alo aretz sheketzu, clearly lo yei achel. What will be an example of a category of creatures that are included? It's not a behema tameya or a chaya tameya, but a sheretz ha'aretz kegoin. Now, for those of us who are using the chayenos, the next 2 words is a printing mistake. Take out the words choyled and sav. The Rambam writes, Nechashim, Akrabim, snakes, scorpions, beetles, centipedes, and the like. Halacha Zayin. Now, Halacha Zayin, we're going to quickly go over between Machalis Asurais and the laws of Tum and Tara. Interestingly, even though we're learning the laws of Kashrus, and we're using the under the umbrella of Ma'achalis Asurais, we're using the words Asur, or kosher as mutter, Isser v'heter. The Torah uses the words tamei and tar also in the context of that which you may or may not eat. However, in Halacha Zayin, we are dafka here speaking about the laws of Tumah and Tara. Now, there is a crossover, but don't confuse one with the other. Animals that are dead give off Tumah, right? Chayas that are dead give off Tumah. However, when it comes to whatever is included in the word sheretz, the little creepers, right? It looks like they're crawling on their bellies, even though there are many feet, but they're fisalah, So a sheretz, when they are dead, generally they do not give off tumah. However, the Torah specifies 8 shiratzim that when they're dead, they do give off tumah. So that's halacha zayin. Ushmoyne shiratzim hu amurim b'Torah, and they are the choyle, the achbar, the tzav, etc. In English, he's teaching it as a weasel, a mouse, which includes the rat, the ferret, the hedgehog, the chameleon, if I pronounce that correctly. If not, Danny will help me. The lizard, the snail, and the mole. Oh,
chameleon.
Chameleon. Thank you. You took away. Where's Danny? Eshlaf. He's good. Exactly. God forbid. So here we go. Here the shear is different. In other words, since the Torah says that if you have a adosha, which is a lentil size part of this creature, they give off tumah. So we're saying that if you eat even only that amount, you're also already going to get malchus. Loike. Why is that? Shiur achilasan kishir tumasan. And since the Torah uses the words tuma regarding the isur achila, and now clearly that parsha that we quoted from Shmini is talking about normal tuma, imparting spiritual, ritual impurity. So we change the shiur when it comes to the isur of achila. Furthermore, says that Rambam bekulam mitztarfim ze'im zeh. If you have a little shtickle, it means a half of a lentil size of a weasel and another half of an adosha of a mouse, we combine them when it comes to the isur of eating in order to get malchus. Only after they're dead. In other words, since then they impart tumah, and the Torah was megala that tumah by these shuratzim is even only from the shiur of a adosha. So we say the isur achila, unlike everything else, is kezayis, they get punished. They're also kadosh, but and the person eats it. Wow, because while they are alive, they do not impart tumah. So we don't have the din of the adosha for tumah. So we can't make it a shear of less than a kezayis, because normally when the Torah says thou shall not eat, Hashem means thou shall not eat, to be punished if you ate a kezayis or more. And v'chulam, it started from the kezayis. Now, ava ochal aver shalom and asheretz achar shemeis, even though you ate a complete aver, here also, once it's dead, the shit has to be a adosha. And one of these little fisalach, of the chameleon won't have the size of a adosh. Halacha 9. Dam shmoyne shiratzim. Interestingly, and its flesh, both are considered same, so therefore they combine to form the ka'adosha. And we're going to go through, we're going to see the chidushim of when we combine the dam with the basar, when we don't combine the dam with the basar, by the shmoyne shiratzim we do. The chein dam hanachash, now guys, nachash does not impart tumah. So the shear of the isur of eating a nachash, to be punished with malchus, is a kezayis, peseder. But this concept that dam and the basar are considered one is also by the nachash, mitztaref l'bsarei, for the shear of a kezayis. And then you'll be like because when it comes to certain creatures, like the ones we are mentioning, she'ein b'sarei chaluk midamai, even though b'chlal a nachash is not metamei. And therefore the shear of malchus for achila is a kezayis, but by the shiratzim we say that the dam and the basar are considered one type, and they combine to the isur kezayis to get punished in a court. Dam shiratzim sheparish. So we said the dam is only when it's mechuber babasar. What happens if the blood left? Ukanasai and va'achaloi. So the dam itself, like a olav, is. And guys, the Rambam doesn't have to write it, but the same will be dam from the shmoyne shiratzim sheparash, and you gathered it, and a person consumed it, God forbid, the malchus will be b'ka'adasha. For who sheyasru by mishum oichel sheretz. No details. When it comes to giving a person malchus, it has to be hasra. Part of the asra is to say what law are you violating. You have to tell the person when they're having dam of a sheretz that God said not to eat a sheretz. If a person was forewarned, you can't eat dam, no, you're potter. Because the dam, the taka we may not eat with malchus, that the Torah is speaking about mitzad dam, is only dam behema v'chaya v'oif. Okay, very good. Halacha Yudalef. And by the way, dam behema v'chaya v'oif, yechayv kares. Also different punishments. Point is that dam of a sheretz is not considered as a separate entity. It's not dam, which is taka why l'chumra you're mitzdaref the dam and the bos. Halacha Yudalef. Chol hashiyurim umachle koisem. Right, we make them distinct. Kezayis, ka'adosha. All of that is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Halacha Yud Beis hoichel kezayis m'sheretz hamayim. Let's move on to another animal type called a aquatic teeming animal. Loikim in Torah shenemar al tashaksu as nafshe seichem u'chalash sheretz v'lo yisitamu bam. Now, hadei kolal b'lav zeh sheretz ha'aretz v'sheretz ha'oif v'sheretz hamayim. So that's how we're stretching it out. So since when it comes to sheretz ha'aretz, the Torah writes clearly lo yei achel, even though the Torah doesn't write here lo yei achel. We're not saying that the lo yisitamu. Maybe the lo yisitamu is the lav, but it includes also the sheretz hamayim. What's called the sheretz hamayim? Elu habriyas aktanois, like toiloim, like worms, like alukas, leeches that inhabit the water, and also vahabriyas hagadoilus beyoser shem chayois hayom. They are beasts of the sea. Now, a beast of the sea is a fish? No. Just like we said, an adam is not in the category of a behemoth. Not of a dog tummy, not of a dog toy. As an example of something that doesn't look like a fish, kelev hamayim, that's called a seal. Guys, a dolphin here, just to know for the record, is not a dolphin. Maybe it's a dolphin, but I'm saying Rashi in Bechayr is Daf Ches. That's the famous Rashi that he teaches. A dolphin is a creature that looks half Suras Adam and half Suras dog. Take a look, Bechayr is Daf Ches in the top of the Amud and Rashi. The Hatzfardei and the frog, they are, since they don't look like a fish, they're not in the category of fish, they're in the categories of sheretz hamayim, also asur. Okay, halacha yud beis. Now, elu haminim hanevroim ba'ashbois, they come into existence in the garbage, ubegufei nevelois, in the carcasses of their animals, like rima, maggots, v'terleia, and worms v'chayoytze bohem. The Rambam writes the words that we find in Chazal, she'ein nivroim yizacharu nekeva, that they are not created through a male-female relation. Big topic, whether there are creatures that taka on no level come into the world with such a relation, or since to the naked eye we cannot see the male and the female union, so it appears to us that it comes straight from the garbage. Maybe that's what they mean. Ella min haglolim sheisrichu v'chayoytze behem. When the dirt decays, that's how they come into being. They are called roimes al ha'aretz, creatures that creep on the earth, and that differentiates them from sheretz hashoyretz al ha'aretz. It's a good kasha. It's a trivial question. Like we ask, what's sheretz? What's a remes? Sheretz is it comes from a zocher nekema. Remes is when it comes, it looks like, or a taka comes without a union of male and female. And here also, the ha'oichel nem kezayis loike, as it says, v'loisitamos nafshe seichem b'chol hasheretz haroimes al ha'aretz, and that's the remes. Afal pi she'einu param v'rabim, avol hasheretz hashoyretz al ha'aretz. What makes it called a sheretz and not a remes is that which is poira v'roivim yizocher nekeva. Halacha yudalt. Now, there are certain creatures that they come into being from fruits or from other foods. So there, the din is, if they left that fruit when they exited their source, even if they came back inside, then if a person ate from it, and let's go to the classical shir to be chayv malchus akazayas, you'll be chayv malchus shenemar l'chol hasheretz hashoyretz alo aretz lo yisarchun kisheket saying. And the reason why the Torah uses these words hashoyretz alo aretz only when they are shoyretz alo aretz, only when they creep on the ground, then are they awesome with malchus. Last one, elu shepereshu aretz. Avol im lo pereshu, if they are still in their place where they were formed, inside the fruit. We'll see details if they were formed in the fruit when the fruit was connected to the tree, that's connected to the ground. That's also going to be also with malchus. Speaking about you harvested the apple, it's laying on your counter. In there, if a creature was created, if it's in its source, not only don't you get malchus, it's not even also midrabanan. Muter leechol apri batilasha b'toichai. Halacha tezo omed that it only came into being after it was disconnected or uprooted from the ground, because then we say it was never shoyretz on the aretz. But if while it was still connected to the tree, that is when some of it rotted and it developed into this creature, then oisar asura ki'ilu perishol aretz, because sha'al ha'aretz nivreis and yechayiv malchus. Now, if you have a doubt, so therefore, doubt me that I see it's awesome. If and when such fruits you may not eat, maybe there is a telas. Masha incan fruits that normally don't develop worms in them when they're on the tree, they only develop worms when you harvested them and they're beginning to decay. Such fruits you are allowed to eat. You might bite into a worm. If it never left its source, it's mutalachatchila. Now, also because if it developed a worm while it was still connected to the ground, that creature would not live against a year. Now, how tasty will a fruit be if it's disconnected for 12 months? That's another kasha. But the worm is kosher. What happens? Details. You have the fruit. The worm only began to come into being after it was disconnected from the tree. And the worm began to kricharois, but it didn't hit the ground yet. It only stuck its little cute head out of the fruit, and it flew out, and it didn't touch the ground yet. And you chopped it in the ear. You put your mouth, and you made a l'chaim, in these mashkas that they have with worms somewhere in a place called Mexico. Or some of it touched the ground. After it died, it fell on the ground. So it wasn't shoyretz al haaretz, it wasn't creeping, it was dead already. Or if it left where it was created, it moved around in the fruit itself. It went to the sea. It went from one fruit to the neighboring fruit. So the Gemara has a question regarding all of the above, and therefore that among paskins, so you're not allowed to eat it, but on the other end, you're not going to get malchus. Moving on, another type of food, worms that are found in the stomachs of fish, or they are found in the moyach of fish. The moyach shoresh behema, or worms that are found inside the basar. And now we're speaking about worms, guys, that were created after the animal died. That's the key. All of these are asura. We don't say what we said now, that if you have a worm that was created in a fruit, since it didn't leave the fruit, you're allowed to eat it lachatchila. That's only when it comes to a fruit, not into anything mentioned in halacha yud zayin. Aval damol liach sheisliam. Here we say, hadei hatila shaboy muteres. Why? Because now we view this fish that's salted like peiros, sheisliu ach shenekim no aretz, that lachatchila shemuter laachlan kulam ka'achas batila shebetoich. In other words, if you know these halachas well, you can make this whole lunch or dinner of halachically kosher worms. V'chein hamayim, that's a niche that no one did yet. V'chein hamayim shebekelim sheisritzu. So if you have a cup of water, it's not a sea, and in these in the waters you have all these little chayalach that form in the water. Because it says in the Chumash, koil asher yesh leisnaper bekaskesas bamayim bayamim banachalim oisam tochelu. From where we learn that creatures that are bayamim ubanachalim without the fins and the scales may not be eaten. But this is not in the waters. This is not in the seas. This is not in the rivers. This is not in a cup. Only and creatures that come into existence in kalim, in a bucket, in a cup, you're leaving it sit. Is also lachatchila muter. We got a whole smorgasbords of different creatures that are mutter to eat. Halacha yudches. Sheretz hamayim Hanivra bashichin ubaboides ubema'aris. So here we go. Here it's not a keli because it's in the ground, but it's not a yam. It's not a nachal. Hoil ve'enu mayim noivim. But since they are gathered together, so we paskin lakula, they are like mayim shebakelim umuter. And therefore, a person can bend over to drink water from them without being concerned that he might be drinking, the protein in it. Because it's 100% okay. Mamish like the fruit, if they are where they were formed. It left the keli, even though it came back into the keli, it came back into the pit, cistern, then it's asur. Now the question is, what happens if it was in the cup, it began to crawl up the cup, but it's in the inside of the cup? Is that called pershu or is that not called pershu? Again, peresh ledafnei hachavius, because of the muter, not even a suffix. No, it did not leave yet. As long, even though it left the waterline, it went above the waterline, but it's still within the keli, and then it went back in. Muter. Halacha chaf. If a person is straining either wine or vinegar or beer, and now and he ate. He removed these little creatures, and he ate either the yavchushin are insects, yatushin are bugs. Insects, krich, and bugs fly, just to know the meaning. If you consumed it, now that you separated it from the wine and from the vinegar, etc., you're going to be like this. Either from sheretz hamayim, that's yachvushin, sheretz ha'oif yatushin. The moment it's flying, it's called sheretz ha'oif, and the sheretz hamayim. So the Rambam is coming now to a point to tell you, now that we spoke about all the different categories and he gave examples, there are certain creatures that share the characteristics of a few of these categories. And if they do, you'll be higher for every type. People know with the Chazal that ha'oichel nemalim chayiv 5 chatois. You have chayiv 5 malchus, I'm sorry. And a namal means an ant. The Rambam will explain it doesn't mean any ant. There's certain ants, there's certain creatures that they share the characteristics from all the categories that we mentioned above. And now, since, like we just learned, since they fully left the Makim B'Yasan, that is when you'll be chayiv, and in these cases, you'll be chayiv a few times malchus. Like we said, it's both sheretz ha'oif and it's sheretz hamayim. It came from the water and it flies. But if it's still in its source, since it was not formed in flowing rivers or in the ocean, it was formed in a cup, in a keli, or even in a boy, shoysev and an imna, like we just said. Gaval. Halacha chafal. Zeh shamarnu bepeidik zeh ha'oichel kezayis is b'sha'achal kezayis mi beria gedoyla oy shet seidef ma'at mi beria zu u'ma'at mi beria zu shebamina at sha'achal kezayis. The key is, when do we allow for hitztarfus to bring about a chi of malchus? Only if both that you ate, they don't have to be the same exact creature, but they both have to be ushered from the same shame, which we just gave different shemos. A shame means a different name. The Torah calls it sheretz hamayim, sheretz ha'oif. You have a sheketz, you have an emes. It has to be of the same type. Then they're mitztaref. Avol ha'oichel beria tameya beria tameya. If you eat an entire forbidden creature, another dinner. Okay, first of all, until the middle of Chafalov, the Rambam is saying implicitly that if you ate half a kazayas from one type and a half a kazayas from another type, if they're not also from the same shame, from the same Torah's categories of love, you don't combine. Another dinner. If a person eats an entire beria, the whole creature, even though the ganze creature doesn't have the size of a kazayas, and even if it's smaller than a mustard seed, whether you eat it while it was dead, whether you eat it when it was alive, beria in itself is us. And because of it rotting, it already doesn't look the way it looked when it was alive. Nevertheless, I think this is called microbiotics. That was the chacham over there, right? That what's healthy when you eat the thing in its entirety, if I'm not mistaken, right? That Abba said of blessed memory. So people think that they're against eating meat. They're not against eating meat. But if you want to eat meat, you got to eat the whole cow. The guy, which we're not allowed to do because you can't have the chayla. But if you eat a chaya with the hooves, with the maisa, then it's good. Hashem made everything the way it is to eat the whole thing up. You eat an apple with the peel. You eat an orange with the peel. I think if I'm misquoting him, I apologize. Not with the peel. Okay, namala and ant. Now here we go. If an ant is less than a kazayis. So a beria means a beria. It means even if only one fisala, one little skinny leg is missing, you're not going to be chayiv. You're only going to be chayiv if you have a whole kazayis. That means a lot of ants together. If you eat an entire fly or an entire mosquito, yes, you'll be like him. Let's go back to what we began learning in Chaf Aleph, that I was giving an example. If you have a creature that shares characteristics from all of these three, for example, it has kanafayim, has wings. It also walks, it has little feet. It walks on the ground. And then like a shalosh malkiyos. And no, it's not only does it have what we mentioned above, it has kanafayim, and it's halachas ala aretz, and the son of abamayim, but it was nivru b'peiris. Then you're like 4 malkiyos. Hoyim and aminim shepanim v'ravim like chamesh. You can have something that is both called a sheretz ha'oif and called a oif tamei. Like all of Misheish Malkius, Mishum oif tamei, Mishum sheretz ha'oif, sheretz ha'aretz, sheretz ha'mayim, roimis ha'aretz, and tolas ha'peiris. Ben shachalakula, or if you ate a kazayis of it, and therefore the Rambam teaches, again, there are certain chazals, the Gemara people quote it, right? Ha'oichel nemalim, chayiv chamesh. It's not that you eat an ant. The ant, the normal ant, you're going to be chayiv for a sheretz ha'sheretz ha'aretz. That's all the ant is. It comes from a discernible union of a zachar and a nekeva. The nemalim is such a normal. It's a flying ant. It has all of these characteristics. Ha'oichel nemala ha'peirachas. He's hagedelas b'mayim. Then you're like a chamesh malkius. And now the final halachem. So now the Rambam said like this: risek nemalois. The nemalois in halacha chav daled is the nemala of the end of halacha chav gimel. Such an ant that's included in 5 different categories. So when are you going to be chayiv 5? Like we mentioned, either if you eat the whole beria, or if you eat a kazayis of it. So if someone crushed these ants, and the hevi achashlema v'tzefer leilush and estasku, and the nasakol kazayis v'achaloi. So interestingly, the Rambam says like a sheish. Ooh, why sheish? So he says like it's 5 because you ate that one nemala. Now, what about the other one? Why don't you say that since you ground them up together? Now, once you grind them up together, then you're only going to chayiv 1 malchus. What's the 1 malchus? You're eating nevelois hatameim, even though it's little, and it's completely different. So you're going to be chayiv for the kazayas of the crushed nemalim that are no longer a mitzias bifnei atzmai. They're nevelos hatameis. And then the fact that you ate 1 beria of this type of nemela that Rambam says, that is a flying, that is hapoirachas, hagedela b'mayim, it's flying and it grew in the water, then you'll be chai for that 5. So altogether, you'll be chai 6. Okay, this was a very important pedic that Rambam Pashat went through, unlike the first pedic, the basic samanim of a behema and a chaya, and of the dogim, remember, and of the oif. Now we went through all of the different categories of macholas asurais, and again, most of them you have a lav and an asay, and the Adam, for example, taka may not be eaten human flesh, but only under a asay. Hapeda gimel.
If you grind it, you're eating a berry also?
No, that's the whole point of the last halacha. When you grind it, it completely loses its characteristic of sheretz oif or sheretz amayim. It's called nevela. Loiseichlu, that's the love. Loiseichlu kol nevela, and that's only 1 malchus.
Some with vegetables that you get the packaged frozen stuff, they say that's okay. You don't have to worry about the bugs.
I don't know that. They don't say that.
Whereas the fresh lettuce, obviously.
No, they don't say you don't have to worry about the frozen just because it's frozen.
So,
of course not. If you have a sheretz, and especially if it's a beria,
because it's processed in a way where it falls apart. Maybe that's it.
No, if it's crushed out and you don't have a kazayis, you're not going to get malchus. That Rambam passes just for the record that you're chayiv chatzi shidus chatz osam and atoyna. Maybe if it gets mixed with something else.
You get frozen broccoli, but not fresh broccoli.
Okay, Pedi Gimel. Let's go back to Pedi Gimel, my friends. A din that we also mentioned in Pedi Krishain. Now we're going to develop the concept that a product that comes from acholas asurais as we'll give examples, if it comes from it, not like honey that doesn't really come from the bee, that Rambam will explain. Hayoytze min hatame is tame, and it's also min hatoira. We will also learn in this chapter, therefore, about chalav akum, and the difference between chalav akum and gevinas akum, and we're going to have something about fish brine, and Perek Gimel has 24 halachas. Let's begin with halacha aleph. Kol machol hayoytze min haminim ho asurim shelo ken alachilos. So now, after learning the first two chapters, it's Gavaldik, it's Metaseder, you get all of the minim. You understand the Shiurim, you know Malchus. So something that comes from such a type for which you chayiv Malchus, Harei Oisa Hamachol Asur Bachila Min HaToira. The greatest example will be Chalei Behema and Bachaya that are Tameim. Another great example will be eggs that come either from an oif or from a dog that are tameim. Now, how do we know that? How do we know that it's asur min hatoira? So there's one case that the Torah gives that becomes like the source for it all. The Torah is speaking about the bas hayana. Bas refers to an egg that comes from the ostrich, which refers to beitzatza. And since the Torah says explicitly you may not eat it, it's asur min hatoira. So it's like a binyan avla chol hatoira kula that kol hayoytze min hatame is tame. We learn it from the bas hayana. That are similar to an egg, like we said, milk or other examples. It doesn't have to be only the egg, but we'll see that it doesn't include everything, as the Rambam will specify. Halacha base. Now, chalei for Adam, and we mentioned in Perek base that Adam is asur min hatoira. Not malchus, but it's asur min tzad. We just gave a klal that something that's yoytze from the tamei is tamei midoiraisa. Nevertheless, chalei for Adam mutar b'achila. Afal pisha b'sar Adam asur b'achila. And as we learned, taka only on the level of an asay, but the exception will be a human milk. Halacha gimel. Honey is not even an exception. It's not the type of hayoitzik. Dvash devoidim, whether it's bees honey or whether it is hornets honey, they are mutar not because it's an exception. No, because they're not mikamtzis gufam. They're not a product from. They don't come from the body of the bee. Ella, all they do is they gather this honey or the sap ma'alu asavim from the asavim, and then they keep it in their mouths and they spit it out in the kaveres and the beehive in order for them to have food to eat during the winter season. So since it's not from them, it's not included in what we're learning here in Perek Gimel. Nevertheless, you have certain rabbinic restrictions. Asru chachamim legadoil, as we'll define the definition here of a gadol, linek oisim in ashodai, to nurse it directly from a woman's body. And then a person can drink it. Then keyonik sheretz. And he gets makis mardus. Halacha, hey, yoinik tinik v'oilech, from the breast. Yoinik tinik v'oilech, a child can nurse. Now we said, I know that you only chayiv malchus, chayiv oinishin when you're an adult. But the Rambam wants to make another point that if the child never stopped nursing, even if he's 4 or 5, then it's okay. But the moment that after 2 years old, he was weaned off, what's the definition of weaned off? That for 3 full days, 72 hours or more, whether it is because he didn't need it, or whether he got weaned off because he was ill, or the mother was ill. Once he stopped after 2 years old, then because of this din d'Rabbanan, that nursing directly from a person, from the mother, is asur. For who? When do we say that? Only shegamalu achar abba ve'esem chodesh abal b'toich zman zeh. Even gimalu a whole month or 2 months, as long as he's within 2 years from his birth, muter lachzer v'linak at soif abba ve'esem chodesh, which is why b'chlal the dinner of a menekes goes for the 24 months. Halacha vav af al pi shechalei behemet tamei and ubeitzei oif tamei are asur min hatoira ein like an alei. Why? Because since the Torah writes one extra time, it's not extra, it's to teach you this, that mipsaram loy soichelu, which means al habasar hu loike ve'eno loike ala beitzav ala chalas. Not only their flesh don't eat, but you can eat the egg. No, we learned it from the Bas Hayana. You may not eat it. The exclusion is only for the punishment of Malkis. Another thing. So how do we view it? And here it's clear that Rambam writes like Rabbi Zajac. No, just because you don't get Malkis, it doesn't mean that it's not us. They don't like. And like all cases, not only by rabbinical, even by biblical law, for which there isn't a biblical punishment, the Chachamim will give you Malkis. Avol Malkin oisim Malkis Markus. Halacha zayin. Yeroli sheha'oichel beitzei dogim tameim hanim tsoim b'mei'ehen ke'oichel kirvei dogim. You don't view them as eggs. You view them as the intestines, and you're going to get Malkis. In other words, there are two things. Number one is they are still baguf. Number one. Number two, you have to know that when it comes to eggs, they don't have a clip. So an egg, even though it's inside, we'll see, you're not going to be chayiv malchus because they're considered distinct. Why? Because they have a clip. Here, two. Number one, it's baguf. And number two, because there's no clip. Guys, you have to add a word veloy, I think. I don't know. I mean, there's loy perishu veloy nigmaru. That's the word. Because veloy nigmaru. That's the key here. Koichel b'nei ayin shalahem. Halacha ches. Beitzas oif tamei shehischil ho efroyach lehisrakein ba. So now we want to know what is the isur. Okay, guys, the egg itself will be awesome, but now it's beginning to develop. The embryo is beginning to develop. Person eats it. Yes, it'll be chayiv mishum. Oichel sheretz ha'oif. Okay, that's, you can see how people, other Rishonim, argue with the Rambam. Aval beitzas oif tohoir. She's chalot reich lisrakim ba. And you eat it, you're only going to get makas mardus. Because you understand that it's developing habam and hator tor. But on the other hand, it's already developing. Once this creature is developed, you'll have to shecht it.
Meaning like one of these eggs that's partially whatever.
It's partially developed. The Rambam says it's also midrabanan by your base that's tar. But you only eat base of
chicken egg.
A chicken egg that has a blood strap, we'll see is chayiv midoraisa. If it's already developing, the Rambam says it's a makas mardas.
That's worse than a blood strap.
No, kasha. All of the Rishonim speak over here about this. Halacha test. Let's move on. Nimsa aleh koyde dam. Now, if you find the blood stuff, so im al hachel boim, if it's found on the chelboin is the white, then zoyre kesadam vo'echel asashar. The issue for which you get malchus is for the blood. We say that there isn't a proper development. It's only found on the white. So taka remove that part and the rest you can eat. But if the moment you find the blood strap on the chelmoin, now we say asura kula. That's the cutoff point. No, it's the blood is asur. That's already a whole different thing. But even if you would remove the blood, we consider the rest of that egg the halacha ches beitzas oiftar shehischelu afroyach lisrakim ba. That's how you define it. Beitza hamuzeres. He says unfertilized eggs. Which is what we do nowadays. Yeah. Not by choice, we don't have an option, but that's gavaldic because there, just for the record, even if there is blood, that is only asur midrabanan if you see it and you eat it. It's a whole different category. Midoraisa, it's not called blood.
So the reason you can't eat it with blood is not because of blood.
There is no. Eating the blood, you're going to be chayiv malchus. Anyways, no. If there's blood, you got a problem. You got to remove the blood. He writes it over here because he's speaking about the partially developed embryo. That's his whole point. That if you see the blood only on the white, it's not called development. Your taka can't eat the blood. You have to remove the blood, but then you can eat the rest. The moment it's on the yellow, we consider the whole thing already as a embryo that's beginning to develop, and it's asur midrabanan. Even if you remove the blood, it's still asur, but asur midrabanan. And if it's unfertilized, then you got no problem.
And the issus, which should be the right also because you eat blood.
So you have to remove the blood, I'm saying. Yeah. Even if you remove the blood, that's the whole point. Now, once it hatched, behema tohira shenitrefa And as we're going to learn, God willing, in Perek Dalet and the next Perek about Hilchas Treifas. What did we begin this chapter with? With the cloud that hayotzim and atame, tame. So how do you view the milk? Chaleva, asur, mamish, kachalev, behema, tameya. Because it's hayotze from that which you may not eat. V'chein beitzas oif, even though it's a category of a kosher bird, if that bird shenitraf, is kebeitzas oif tame, and it's also, guys, also midoiraisa, hayotzim and atame, tame. Halach Yudalef. Efroyach beitzas treifam. Here it began to develop mutter. Don't forget, we just said Efroyach is only asim midrabanan. So if it would not have developed, look at the irony, since this not the species is kosher, but this one is a treifa, will be asim in atoira. Now that it begins to develop, so it's already distinct. So he says mutter. Hoya ha'oif safek treifa, kol ha'beitzim sheteled ba'arei mereshayna. They lay eggs in batches, and it takes, let's say about a chicken, right? We know it takes like 21 days from one batch to the other. So if you have a doubt, I can say like this, that if this mother would lay another batch, that's a raya that she's not a treif. So the first batch you have a safek, put it aside. And if she developed another batch and she started to give birth to the second batch, which is, let's say, after 21 days later, is a raya that it's not a treifa, and therefore hutru rishonis. Because of the doubt, not that this means that you don't know.
By the way, this is the issue with the milk.
The issue with the milk.
The methane.
That's right. No, it's when you don't know that it's treif or there's a roiv that's kosher, you can presume it came from kosher. But if you start doing things to the cows, which they do nowadays, which will make them treif, then even though it's chalav Yisrael is the whole issue is a derabanan. I'm about to minimize the derabanan. Hayotzim and atame, tame is midoiraisa. If you know that the mother was a treif animal, the milk is treif. That's a big problem. Let's go back to halachia. No, that's the whole point. Treifa, that's what we just learned.
It becomes a treifa later.
No, that's no problem. We're speaking about once you know it's a treifa. Let's go back to halachia base. Chalev behema tameya. Guys, chalev. Okay, let's go. Yeah, that's a big problem. Okay, right. Halachia base. Chalev behema tameya. You have an animal that's tummy. So you should know that even though we said that the milk of all non-kosher animals is asam midoiraisa, but there's something that Hashem make different between kosher and non-kosher, and that is they do not coagulate. Doesn't happen. They will not turn into cheese or butter. Now, even if there's a mixture, so it won't ruin the capacity of the tahar milk to turn into cheese, and that's exactly what's going to happen. The part that's coming from the chelav atayra will become cheese, coagulate, and it's going to get thrown to the side with the whey of the cheese, and therefore with the whey, and therefore, then logic would say, then it's asur. Why? Because you won't know if there's a mixture, you can't see it. Obviously, we're speaking about when the Ein Yisrael oimed al gabav to make sure there is no such a mixture. But on the
you have other ingredients you could add to coagulate to make the milk. We're talking about without that.
Okay, I didn't know that. So Tzemach is saying that, if I understand you correctly, that even if it's chalev tameya, now they figured out what to add, the enzymes, and they can
coagulants.
Coagulants. Okay, fine. This is before we had that. Now, it's like this. Once Chazal made a takana that you can't have chalav akum, it doesn't matter. Like all other takanas, chachamim, that's the way we paskin. It doesn't matter if the rationale behind it changes or not. Like any other gezeres chachamim. Let's go back. But again, logic minadin means al pi seichel. So the whole problem is the original reason why they made the takana is because maybe there's a mixture. If there would be a mixture, the cheese cannot come from not chalev tamei. So gvinas had goyim should be muted. The kosher ain't chalev behema tamei misgabim. Like we said, and therefore, even if they mixed it together, when you buy the chunk of smelly cheese, you don't have in there any chalev tamei. That would fall to the side. That's logic. But Avol Bimei Chachmei Mishneh Gosru even on Gevinas Hagoyim. And why? Since they would use a stomach of an animal, which has a din of an avela, to cause it to solidify. Now, I know today there's other technologies, and if that were to happen, as we're going to learn, since the davar hamaimid is something not kosher, so therefore that which came from the non-kosher davar hamaimid is oichit not kosher. So since there is such a chashash, again, even if you know it's not the case, they made a takana against giving a sakum. You know what they didn't make a takana was regarding butter, as we'll get in a moment. Now, im toimar hu haloi oid hakeva is only a davar katan hu an ma'oid b'chalav she'amad bay. So why don't we have the concept of bittul b'miyut? So the Rambam writes because of the clown, it's called the catalyst. It is the ik. It is that which made it coagulate. And v'hoil the davar ha'asur hu shehemed hakol asur, as we're going to learn, God willing, not tomorrow, but in 2 days on Pedig Test. The Seder is Gavaldik. Halacha Yudam. Gevina shemamidem oisam hagoyim, but we know that they're using asavim. You know, you don't have to make gevina by putting it in a keva. You can use different types of herbs, or you can use it with meiperes, like sraf te'enim. And you know something, when you make cheese with those starters, you can push it, look at the cheese and know that it was made by using herbs. It's something that everyone would know how to look at. So here there was a machloikas bisman hagoinim. Was it included in gevina sakum, or is it not included? So the Rambam writes that hoidu mixas goinim, that it's asura. What's the logic of the goinim? Like we mentioned, that's the general rule when it comes to all takanas that were made in the times of Chazal. Since shekvar gozru al kol gevina sagoyim, when Chazal made the takana bisman chachmei Mishnah, they did not differentiate. All of that is Gezeda Mishum Shemidu B'Davar Asur. So even though we know this was taka not made, the Gezeda remains. Halacha Tezvav. Now, Oichel Gevinas Hagoyim, Oichalav Shechalavu Ve'en Yisrael Rayeyu. So what did we say? It's a Isur Midrabanan. So what penalty do you get? The classic Makas Mardus. Now what about Chemam, butter, Chemam Shal Goyim? So here, Chazal never spoke about it. Here, by the way, it's the same logic. That means even though without the coagulants that they didn't speak about, chalev tamei will not become butter. But on the other hand, by gevina they made a takana. So here, mixas go into mitiru. Sharei loy gozru alachema, and the chalev tamei eino oimet. However, mixas go into masrua. Why did they ask it? So here, there's a logic. Unlike by cheese, that if not for the issue of the keva, all of the whey would fall to the side. By butter, if there will be a mixture of chalav, tohira, and tameya, some moisture of the tameya would be in it. Let's read it inside. Mipnei tzachzuchi chalav. The tzachzuchi is sheyishar bo sharei hakoim shebechema eina ma'orev im hachema kadei sheyibatel b'meutei. If it would be better mixed, then there would be bittul. Once it's not mixed, because the chema is a solid. The chema is from the tohira. The tzachzuchi is the lachluchi is, which could be if there was a mixture of the tameya is not mixed with it. And v'chol chalav shalehem chosh shaloi. That's what some go'enim said. Shema eirav by chalev tameya. Now, if that's the case, so the Rambam says a gavaldik leniency. If the reason why the go'enim asked it is because there's no bittul, it would only be a little bit. If she'im lokach chema min hagoyim and you cooked it. Because everything melted now. Now you can say it's mutter. Because even normally we say the Rambam is really saying in between the lines that since it's a machlekes hagoinim, some goinim said it's not also, and even the ones that said it's a chashash, maybe they mixed chalev tameya. The Rambam is basically saying that's a solution. You can buy chemas akum and you melt it down, and now you mixed it all up. But if the goyim were the ones that melted it, so you took away the problem of the potential little bit of chalev tameya and a chanabi. But you got a whole nother section of machalas asudas that we'll learn soon about giyulei akum, about that the tam that's nivla in the kalim, that when you make it hot, it's poilet. As we will learn, guys, in Pedig Yud Zayin, that's already going to be in many program ahead. Okay, halacha Yud Zayin.
So the Rambam is saying you can take the butter As long as you melt it down.
Mamish. Yes.
Now it's good.
Sure. Yes.
But in its solidified state, it's a problem.
Yes.
To smear it on your toes.
By the way, first of all, even in the solidified state, there's a machlokes going. If I'm not mistaken, that people used to be very lenient, not that years back.
Yeah, there was
when it comes
on it for years.
For years, yeah, because that's the in other words, the issur is on chalav. Even the people that are very careful with chalav Yisrael, gevina.
But the addicts here is gevina.
Yeah. Okay, and not on chamel. Okay, like halacha yud zayin. Today it's a non-issue because today you get everything. Everything is made by Yidden and.
Again, the issue with butter is the same. They mix ingredients today that you didn't have in the time.
Thank you. Okay, so Tzemach is bringing up a good point, and that goes to everything. I stand corrected. That now it's in the whole new world. In other words, now any product, you don't know what else they're adding to it. That's the problem. People who say, I'm going to go to a vegetarian restaurant. You don't know what they're putting in there.
The chalav akum or chalav stam butter that you see today is not pure butter. Colors and ingredients.
Very good.
It's not butter.
All products.
A lot of it.
No, but that answers why it has to be certified kosher, right?
So Danny is saying, so that's why you have to have it certified kosher. We're speaking about the chalav akum aspect. Let's go. Halacha yud zayin. Yisrael sheyoshav b'tzad ha'edet. Now let's going to go into the definition of a Yisrael has to be seeing it. What does it mean a Jew has to be seeing it? If he did not see the actual milk leaving the behemoth, but he's standing near the edet. Even though that in this eder you have a behemoth tameo, that's called mirsas. Mirsas means the guy is afraid that if the Jew would take a look over the wall or under the thing, he'll see him. Even though he didn't see him amish milking it, as long as there's the potential, because shahagoy misyore lachloit minatameya shema yamoid v'yira. Obviously, that doesn't go to a farm in Brazil. The guy there doesn't know that a Jew cannot have from a behemoth tamei. We're speaking about a case where they know that a Jew will not buy the chalev behemoth tamei. So if he was close enough for there to be a mirsas, that's the concept of a mashgiach yoytzev v'nichnas. Theoretically, that's something else.
So you go the other way.
You can't say that because the other side will be is that now that Chazal says you need to have Yisrael Ro'eyu, so they said Yisrael Ro'eyu doesn't have to be Mamish Barachal B'Chaktana, can be you're in the neighborhood. But once they said that's what you need, then you always need it. If we view this as a Takonas Chazal, then you got a problem. That's a big machlokes between the Rabbanim and Yisrael, the Rabbanim in America, where the cameras are called Yisrael Ro'eyu. In Brazil, when they paskin, the cameras are good. These are good Jewish machlekes, and I think it's beautiful. The goyim have a soccer, and we have this, and you're going to shul and two teams.
You should put a camera, let your housekeeper know that you have a camera.
That definitely helps. Yeah. Okay, let's go back. Halach yud ches. Beitza. Now let's go. How do you know if the egg came from a kosher or non-kosher species? Like the Perek Aleph on Shabbos, the Rambam is giving us a Torah Shabbat, a Mishnayos, and a Siman, which is if both ends of the egg, if they are symmetrical. Either if they're both kadin or if they're both chadin, whether they're both rounded or they're both relatively sharp, that's an eye. It comes from a bird that's tummy. Or even if it's like our eggs, which they're not symmetrical, one side is wider than the other, but look at the white and the yellow. If the yellow is in the outside and the yellow is called the yolk, and the white is in the inside, by a dua, she oif tummy. But if one head is kad and one head is chad, it's asymmetrical. Asymmetrical. And the chelboin b'chutz. Now it's amazing. The problem is that is not a siman for sure that it's good. Now it could be good. Efshen, still it comes from a beitzah seif tamei. The efshen shiyah beitzah seif tamei. So therefore, what do? You have to have lefikach shoyel latzayod. The yid goyim don't have namanas for this. So ask the yid, the trapper, right, of these birds, the trapper of the eggs. Ask him where did it come from? Im amaloi, if he doesn't only say that it comes from a kosher bird, he gives you the name of the bird. That means he has to be a mumcha. Oif ploinihu, he gives you the name of the mama, and he tells you that it's tahar. If he only says oif taharu, but he doesn't know the name, you can't rely on him. Halacha yotes, lefikach. Ein loikchen beitzas min hagoyim. Only if the goy recognizes them. The yesh by tvias ayin that they can't be beitzas oif ploini yatar because he has no din about us. Now, we learned even if it comes from a kosher species, hayotzim and atame tamim midoiraisa. Maybe the bird is a beitza treifa. We don't have to be choishish to that because of the majority. Kala parush miruba parush. The ein loikchen min hagoyim beitza terufa klal. Beitza terufa means a unshelled steered egg. Again, you don't. There's no nemonis. You cannot be marked. What type of egg is halacha? Beitza dogim. Simonayim kisimoni beitzi yo'oiv. How great is that? No, the simonim are only good to know if it's not good. To know if it's good for sure, it's not good enough. No, it's if both tips of these eggs, what do they call them? Caviar, if they are kadim, if they're both kadim, then tameim. If one is round and one is sharp, then efshe that it's good. Now you have to ask the yid that's selling it. If he tells you, I salted the fish and I removed it from that fish tar, the imam just to hide him, if he doesn't tell you what type of fish it came from, ain't an emon. Unless he's a yid that's already shehus chak bekashrus. Halacha follows. The chein ein loikchen gevina or a chatichas dag that has no siman, only from a yid shehus chak bekashrus. So here we are starting to learn about the mother, the zayda, the grandmother of the kashrus industry. Because you have to have people that have a cheskas kashrus to rely on them. Avol, it's not enough to have a yid that's a frum. He has to know. He has to be a mumcha. Avol Beretz Yisrael, kish hoiser riba li Yisrael, meaning when the most of the people that were there were frum, then loichen we call Yisrael Shabbat. Next in, bahecholov loichen oisoi from any yid from any place. Halacha chav beis hakoivesh dogim tameim. You are pickling non-kosher fish. Right, so the tzir, the brine, like we began the spedic, is also us. However, avol tzir chagavim tameim, they are mutter, not for the same reason we said when it came to the honey. Here, and knock yourself out, probably very geschmack, the juice that leaves chagavim, they don't have lachluchias. Now, I don't understand, how can you have brine if there's no moisture? Tell me exactly what is brine. I don't know. So whatever it is, it's not considered moist. Lefikach, like this. Ein loichem simen hagoyim. Elim kain hayod dog tar mishoited boy. The lefikach goes to the beginning of chav beis. Even if it's only one fish, then we assume that all of the brine came from the same species of fish because it would be detrimental financially for them to mix from different fishes. So if you see some fish in the brine, that's tar. You see a scale. Everything good.
Don't we say kavush conversional sense? You have
okay, so Rabbi Yaakov is asking, there's another issue that if this, why don't we say kavush k'mavush? I'll tell you why. Because if a kosher species was pickled, taka for 24 hours or who knows how long they would do it. If all they're using is a duck tar, then everything is tar. If he has many different barrels and they are all open, right? The dog if they are open, you know what happens when you transport liquid in open barrels? You splash from one to the other. So what he would never have in different barrels from different fishes. That means even if one, you have a little stick of fish in one, you say everything is mutter. But if they are sealed and pasach achas mehem and you open up another barrel in a daktar, here two is enough for a chazaka. Kula mutaris. But you have to see some fish. What's some fish? In order for you to discern that it's a daktar. Because it's crushed, you cannot identify them that are already salted from goyim. They goyim would call it tris terufa because you don't know. You have to find a piece of kosher fish. Even though the rest of the fish is merutzatz, mutar likachoisam min hagoyim gevaldik. And the final halacha chav dalid goy shehevi garav shel chatichas dag shechetuk neshama. He's bringing a keg. And in it, you have evenly cut shtiklach fish. And you can see that they are all from one species. You don't know what fish it is. Like today you go to Ralph's. So if you find one, they all look alike. you can make this a tzad hashava. So if one of them comes with a kaskeses, what did we learn yesterday in Perek Aleph? If it just has kaskeses, it means it has a snap. Even if you find only one scale, that means that this piece is a min tohaira. And again, the presumption here is that you can assume that since they all look alike, they're cut the same way, that all of them are from the same min. How they call them mutara? He's gewaldig. All right.
Do we use a backbone and a head as a simon today?
Today we use the kaskeses.
Or the color of the fish also. For salmon, they say.
Color of the fish. So Rabbi Nathanson keeps on saying that now, but everything is fake. It's fake only for salmon. You have to know because they can, like you said, they can add other beautiful chemicals aside of the hormones to poison us from the other side, and that can make this look like that.
But is the backbone and the head of a fish, of a kosher fish, different than a non-kosher fish?
No, it just allows you to identify the fish. If you're a mumcha tzemach and you look at this and you say, aha, this is that type, it's good. You identified it. Perek Dalet, the final chapter of today. These are the basics. It's Kavalik in the beginning. The halachas of Nevela, where we're going to begin with the halachas of Treifa, as the Rambam will explain. We're going to learn about Misukenes. Misukenes is not Treifa. If you shechta Misukenes, if there was Pirkos, if there wasn't Pirkos, we're going to learn the dinam. Misukenes is an animal that's not Treifa, doesn't have from the 18 simonim, but it's ill. Not because there's a hole in the body, because it's alta behema, alta mice, alta behema. It's about to die, so you want to chaparayim and shecht it. The question is, it's so old and weak, maybe prior to the shechita, it died. Like, how do you know that it didn't die before the shechita? So that's a bit of pirkus. And the combinations more, it's serufim of isurim. We learned a little bit today in Perek Beis. We're going to have a lot more now in Perek Dalet. Perek Dalet has 22 halachas, beginning with halacha alf. I want to say that many people have a special attraction to these dinim, and they should learn a lot of it. Many of our kids, they don't like this part for some reason. Some people love it. Chulin. Right, it's true. There's something about it. I know the OU, they made once a zasu'uda from all the unusual types of, I think, gewaldig. And they have to hold the Masorah dinner.
They used to cut the heads of the chicken.
Anyways, we're going to have, not on the level of the Masorah dinner, but on August 30th, to be announced, the location, maybe not here, it's completely alive. We're going to have a phenomenal.
Doesn't the Gemara say that the people that are supposed to be murderers, they become sheftim?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but not. I think this is not about shechting. This is about people that are attracted to the type of eating. So this is the kosher outlet. I'm not going to do the shechita, but I'll look at the shechita.
If you have a taiva for giraffe meat, that's for you.
Here you go. All right. Let's go. So if you have an animal that died, even if it's a kosher species, or a chaya shemesa, oif shemeis, that's the meaning of a nevela. It died without shchita. So this is also midairaisa. You get malchus shenemar loisechel kol nevela. The chol shaloi nishchata keraun. No, it's, by the way, you can have the act of shchita, but as we're going to learn, the 5 basic halachas of shchita, one of them was not done properly. If it's not a halachically valid shchita, that's called a died, and that's called an nevela. And in Hilchos Shchita, which comes after Machalas Asurais, right, Yisbar HaShchita, what's Roy and what's not called Roy. The 5 basic dinim. Halacha base. Ein asun mishum nevela, ella minim tohinim b'vad. That's the key. So if it's a min tahar, which means since it could have been kasher through Shchita, it would have been mutter ba'achila. It is that type of animal that the Eibishter said, if it died, or if it had a shchita, she'edu re'uya, it's called an aved. Avol minim tameim, she'ein shchitasim mayelos bahem, you have a pig. Even if someone technically shechted it, or whether it died kedarka, and you ate it, yes, you'll be chayiv malchus because of oichal bisar tameim. Very important. Halacha gimel. Ha'oichel oif toir chai kol shehu loike mishum oichel nevela. Because what did we just say? If the animal's demise did not come through a proper shchita, it's called nevela. You understand? So you ate it, it died when you ate it. What did you violate? It's an oif tar nevela. By the way, when it comes to Hilchos Tumah V'Tara, you have that very unique din that an oif tar is metame the Beis Habliyah. We'll learn about this when we're going to learn the laws of Tumah and Tara. Oif, correct, very good. Going back to something that we learned in Perek Beis when we learned the Shiyurim, Beria. If you ate all of it, you're like. The kazayas can be from the gidim, from the atzamais, they all combine to the kazayas. You'll be chayev mishum nevela. Interesting. Here we say by a bird that again clear that if you ate all of it when it died, it must have a kazayas. Okay, halacha dal. Ha'oichel kazayas mipesar nefel behema tohira. And also, like a mishum, oichel nevela. Very good. The asur lechol min habehema shenolda. Another did b'chlal ad leil shemini. Why? Because if you don't know for sure that this animal was gestated in the full term, it has a din of kin nafel. Guys, remember that Rambam. Kin nafel means just suffix nafel. Don't know the categories. And since it's a suffix, that we learned that already today. You can't do it. You can't do it, but you're not going to get malchus. Right? Ain't like an Allah stuff. Now,
animal you have to wait to 8 days.
Yeah.
But a chicken, it says even if the eyes aren't open, you can check it.
Correct. Now, if you know that the time that it needed to be in the womb, it was in the womb, and then it was born. What is that? Again, the same b'chayris recorded from the dolphin, right? From the mermaid. That is the amud that goes into the whole atuna chachmei savei the atuna. That's where Chazal began. That's it all began with that. How long does it take? So they spoke about the snake. So there was a pushback with the 7 years. Shehem, the Gemara says, Chazal say 9 months to a behema gasa, 5 months to a behema daka. If you know this, it gestated full term, then you can shecht it on the day it was born. But if not, since we said en nefo is nevela gavaldik, so that's why. And once it's an avela, even though you shechted it, it doesn't help. It has the din of an avela. Halacha, hey, what about the shilya? What about the placenta? So hashilya shiotzim ablad asur ba'achila, but it's not called nevela. Ha'oichel pater she'eno basar. Halacha vav. Ha'oichel kazayis mipsar behema chayu oif tohirin shenitrfu. Now we're going to go shenit. Shenitrfu means there was a wound that the Torah says it's a mortal. This animal cannot live for a full year. Even though you shechted it, like Shenemar, now the word treifa means it was ripped apart. That's one example of it being mortally wounded. And what should you do? Like which means it's mutabanam. So says the Rambam that treifa that the Torah uses is speaking shetarfa oisa chaya sayar. It was mortally wounded by a wild beast, like an ari or like a named. V'chayoytza bohem. V'chein oif shetaraf oisan oif hadoiris, like an eitz, like a hawk. V'chayoytza boy. Now v'iyata yachalemer that the pasuk is referring to an animal that not only was attacked but it also died. If it already died, it's an avela. Shetaraf oisan v'misa oisa, because if it died, it's an avela. And why would the Torah have to specify? There's no need for that. Mali meisabach atzma. Mali if it got killed by a sword. Mali if it was broken by misa. Must be. The animal didn't die. The vart is you taka shechted it. Navras then, since it has that mortal wound, it's also a separate love. Even though today generically we say it's treif, but that's a borrowed term. That's a shema mushal. Really, either tameya. Like we mentioned, nevela and treif is only, like a chazir is not treif, a chazir is a nevela. A chazir is a min tameya, different category. You have to know what hasra to give for a person to be chayv on this. Halacha zayin. Ve'im et treifa shalei meisa suram. Now, oy bazoi yochel and baze eva garar gediva ragloi. Oy biznava b'yazmei. And v'rada v'itzilam ipid, you'll think it's asur because it was attacked. No. Talmud Leimer ubasa basada treifa la kelef tashlichan oisai at sheyase oisa basad haroy la kelef, which means halamadata shatreifa mora batreiram who he shatar for oisa chayas hayar v'shavra oisa v'natolamas, but it didn't die yet. not every animal that was attacked is going to become a treifa. That is harezu asura mishum treifa. But if it would be able to live, even though it was attacked out there, now we're going to have to introducing many pratim of treifas. Not everything makes the animal treifa. Like this, hamesa, which is called an avela, and the asra hanoita lamus because of a certain wound, even though it didn't die, even though you shechted it, and that's called treifa. Uchashem shaloi tach like ba mesa, whether mesa machmatz asfa, whether shenaflo mesa, ben shechan kanche mesa, ben shenidresata chayiv harakta. So now we're going to take that same concept and put it to a treifa. What's the example the Torah gives of a treifa is because a chaya, an ari, attacked your nebach, your cow. But what happens if no one attacked your cow, but a mortal wound happened to the cow without it being attacked? Oichet treifa. If the animal has such a type of wound, whether it's because it was attacked or it broke something, or whether it just fell off the roof and most of its ribs got broken, as we'll see. Most of its limbs got crushed, or if someone shot an arrow and the arrow went through the heart, it perforated the heart, it perforated the lungs. But this illness, that's the key. It's not an animal that's ill. It's an illness that made for one of the organs that may not be perforated to get this perforation. The nikav liba or nikav reyasa, the lungs got a hold, perforated. Point is, it's a wound. It's a shinoi baguf in a certain way. All of that is included in the treifa, whether it was going to be the basar v'dam, or whether it happened what we call bidei shamayim. In Cain, lama nemar batayda treifa, because normally animals get such wounds if a larger animal attacked it. If you're going to touch the pasuk like the Karaim did, no. The Torah also says treifa basada. And what happens if it happened in your yard? Right, the wolf came into your yard. What are you going to say? Then it's okay. If you're going to follow the letter. Like the normal situation, the Torah gives a example. Halachites. The inyan harkosov, the intent of the pasuk is shahanoita lamus. The key is because there is a wound. What type of wound? That the efshalon lichyois machmas makazu. That is asura means midorais. The kanom rechachamim zaklal kol she'ein kamoya chaya. It will be termed a treifa. Now, ubehilcha shchita, the Rambam is going to dear right. It really belongs to Hilcha Shchita because in most cases you can only discover it after you shechted it if you go looking for it. If it's min hatohoiden, we're not speaking about a limb, we're speaking about flesh. It has the status of a treifa. Farvas, why treifa? Shaharei basar zem came from a behema. Shaloi nishchata v'loi mesa. Look at the logic. The animal is still alive. Don't forget, guys. Nevela is only chal when the animal died. Treifa is not connected to whether the animal is living or not. If the animal became treifa, then it died. We're not calling that a treifa. We're calling that an avela. Umali tarfo isachaya, mali hatacha besakin, mali bekula, mali b'mitzasa. Hareyo emiru basar basada treifa lo yisrechelu. In other words, kivan shenasis habehema basar basada. How did that happen? By you cutting off a piece of basar. That is also mitzah treifa. Reini trefes. So now this segues into a misukenes, because a misukenes is an animal that doesn't have a makkah. The animal is very old. By the way, Misukenes can be an animal with cancer. It doesn't have a hole. It has too much cells. It has too much. It has a growth. So, halacha yudal. Behema shichoyla machmas toshas koicha. Benot alamus. Hoyel v'loy eira maka be'evrim me'evorel. Halamisa ma'isa. As we're going to learn all of those details in the section of Hilchas Shchita. Harezu moteres. Shaloi asra toida eleke ein terefas chayis hayar, sharei nasas b'maka hamamisa oisam. So Aleph, the beginning of Misukenes is theoretically, even though the animal has another few hours to live, the animal is dying. If you shechted kehil chasa, it's going to be good, but halacha yibes. Afa pishum muteres k'toy lechachamim loy hoyu oichem nebehema shemeshim b'maharim v'shechten oisa kedei shaloi tamus. And again, there's two issues here. Number one is, if the animal is that old and weak, it could be when you began the shechita, the animal died. And there's a simon. How do you know whether that happened or not? Whether the animal had a convulsion, as will be defined in a moment, or not. So the Rambam is already anticipating. Even if there was the pirkus, so we know that it was a geshacht in an animal, not an animal that died before the halachic shechita was over. Still, some chachamim would not eat from it. And you should know that's called a chumrah. The davar zeh ein ba yisud. Whether when you buy your glatt kosher, whether it didn't have, I don't know. I don't think people are that machmer today. For sure, animals have a lot of value. I'm not sure.
Cows that are slaughtered are very young these days. They're 1 or 2 years old, so I don't think that this is such a big area.
My sheikh teacher, Rabbi Matov, I saw him shechta mesukenes. Not true.
When I worked in Postville, when the farmers would unload the trucks, if there was an animal that couldn't stand on its own four, was limping, they put it to the side. They did not shecht it.
Wow. Okay, here you go. I'm correct.
There was an area with the downers. They called them downers. They put them over there, send them back.
They sent them back.
Well, I don't know what they did with them. They didn't shecht them.
Okay, very okay. Anyways, if Misukenes had pirkus, the Rambam is saying not eating it is a chumrah. Halacha yud gimel. And no blood left out. And if you are a mumcha shoichet, shechting the veins is not part of shechita. We do it because then it's going to facilitate the salting later. But even if no blood left, it had elam mutarim. And why was there no blood? Shema mesa, it was already dead. If the animal is known to be healthy, even if there's no pirkus, as we'll explain in a moment, there was no convulsions, halachic conversions, also mutaris. The Rambam wants to make it clear. When do you have to see whether there is pirkus? If you're shechting a misukenes, avala misukenes, which means he called shema midin oisa. Gavaldik, I like the word downer. It means when you stand it up, it can't stand. It cannot stand on its own 2 feet. Right? It's a simchas toida after a couple of lachaims. It's still eating healthy food. And the pickles. If such an animal that cannot stand on its own, if after you shechted it didn't convulge, because halacha says is araya, even if it was living prior, you began to shech the semanim, it died already. The loikin from the veil. But the empirikasa, then when are we looking for
the determining factor is if it convulses.
If it convulses, and when does it have to convulse? Only at the end of shechita. And by the way, shechita, depending on the sheichet, as we're going to learn in shechita, right? If the knives then in the times of Chazal were nowhere near as sharp as the knives today, as long as you don't stop the movement, you're going and coming and going and coming. You can go, you be there the whole day. Has to be at the end. Now let's go. Not the end of shechita will be defined in al-shechita. We want to know what these movements have to happen by the misukenes. If it's a behema daka, or if it's a chaya gasa or daka, bein shepashta yada ve'achzira. If either the forearm, 2 movements, extend back, or the leg only 1 movement, shepashta ragla afapi shalei achzira, or only bent the leg. No, it's by the leg, only 1 direction. Hands coming and going. That's called pirkus. If it happened beside shchita muteres. Avol, if the hand only pashta v'lo yachzira, that's asur, because the pashta yada is what happens when the nefesh goes out. She'ein zu eloi tzuas nefesh. That's by behema daka and chaya ben gasa ben daka. By behema gasa. A behema gasa won't make any movement if it's dead. Or only kafafa v'lei pashta, any direction. That's called pirkus. Umuteres. But the im loy pashta, yo lad loy for cloud. So then we say it's an avela. And what about a bird? Same concept. Afilu loy rifreif, blinking the eyelid is called pirkus. V'loy kishkesh elabis navoy, or it moved its tail. We speak about a bird with a tail. Which bird has a tail? Achonish kan anund. Hareze pirkus. Halacha tezvav. Hashrechet is a misvekenes balayla. You can't see. V'lo yodim pirkus only pirkus. So now we say it's a suffix nevela, and again you can't eat it. Now move new topic. The new topic now is what about combinations? Halacha tezayin. Kol isurim shebatoira ein mitzvah from zeh em zeh. The only exception is Isuri Nazir, as we'll learn in Isur Nazir. The Torah writes there, if you remember, Koil Asher Yaseh Migefan Hayayin. From that pasuk, Chazal learned that any part of the grape combines with any other part of the grape. Right, so the kazayis, so you can have a part of the seeds and part the skin. Other than that, we're not mitzvah. And therefore, let's come back over here. Halikeach ma'at chelef. That's one issue. Guys, remember what we learned in Perek Aleph. Chelef is only from a min behema tohir. And a little bit of dam. And a little bit of behema tomeyo. Uma'ad basar nevela. Uma'ad basar dak tameh. Uma'ad basar oif tameh. The chayotzim elam mashara yisurim. And v'tzidav asakal kazayis. And your person ate it. Ein a loika. Don't think it's mutter. The Rambam says here again, second time you learned it today. The dinoi will be like eating chatzi shir doesn't mean half of a kazayis. It means any amount that we paskin like Rabbi Yechanan that what chatzi ashir is osur min ha-Torah, but the ein malkin say. And by the way, the Rambam already wrote, you get makas mardos. Okay, halacha yudzay. Kol hanavelos mitzarf is umzu, but anything that's in the category of an avela, which means it can be a chatzi nevela behema, chatzi nevela chayo. If it's under the name, the shame echad of nevela, yeah, mitzarfin. Nevela is also another chiddush that nevela and treifa, that's the only exception. They combine. You know why? The Rambam is going to write later. The Rambam is going to write these words that nevela. That treifa is called chilas nevela. That's what the Rambam is going to write soon at the end of one of the following halachas. So it's called the same. The chayin kol behema v'chayim tameim. Start from zemzeh. Avol b'sad nevela. In Besar Behema Tameya, because we already began in this Pedic that an avela of a Behema Tameya is not Asur Mitzad Nevela, right? That it's Asur Mitzad Behema Tameya. It's a different shame, it's a different love. Ketzad. Halakech Menivlas Ashoy. Right, Shoyed we learned is a Behema. Umenivlas Tzvi. What did we learn in Pedic Aleph? Tzvi is a Chayer. Doesn't matter. They are both Asur because they're an avela. Or v'nivlas atarnago, and only when you combine the ashtikl from each one do you have a kazayis, then you can be chayv malchus. V'cheinem kibetz chatzi zayis v'nivlas behematoid. Chatzi zayis min atreifa. Again, that's the chiddush. Chatzi zayis from b'sar nevela. Chatzi zayis from b'sar min achayim v'toiro beloika. Chein b'sar hagomel and the chazim and the arneves. She kibetz kol mikazayis v'acholoi loika. Avlim tzid of chatzi kazayis v'nivlas ashoy. And half a zayis from b'sar hagomel. You get it? Gomo is called behema tameya. It's not called a veil. And it's not. You violated 2 chatzi shiurim, which is terrible. You're not going to be chayv malchus. Yechein kol kayetz bezeh. Yechein kol behema tameya v'oif tamei. Oy dog tamei v'oif tamei. Ein basar shneiim mitztaref lefi shem shnei shemois. Sharei kol echad mehem b'lav v'tnei atzmei. As we learned in the first Pedic and the second Pedic, avol kol oifes atameim. Even though they have different names, how many lavin? It's what's included in that lav, in that shame. Avol kol efes atameim mitztarfim, k'moishem mitztarfim, kol behema v'chaya tameos. Zaklal, kol she'isurim b'lav echad, mitztarfim. If they are aser from 2 lavin, these are good klolim to remember. Ein mitztarfim. The only exception is nevela and treifa. It's taka 2 different lavin. Here we go. Hoyel v'atreifa tchilas nevela. That's the liner. Halacha yutches. Ha'oichel minavela utreifa. Oy minabehema v'chaya tameim. But what did you eat from it? Either the hide, the skin, or the bones, or the sinews, or the horns, or the telephim, the hooves. Or if you have a bird a claws of a bird. From a place that if you were to cut it, blood would spurt out, or from the placenta, even though it's asur, since these are not considered foods that are royal achila, and the ein mitzdarfen in abasalik zayis. Halacha yutes. Other exceptions. Don't confuse, guys, what we learned before about Gevina Sakum, which is done in one of the stomachs called the keva. This halacha is not speaking about the keva. This halacha yutes, is speaking about milk that's found in the keva. That's how you're not going to get tripped up here.
What about that comes from bones of a non-kosher animal?
So we're saying over here, you're not going to be chayv malchus. Kevas hanevela the kevas atamea. Milk, that's the key. No, it's an animal died. An animal died, or a non-kosher species died. Again, a dead behemoth tamei is not called a male; it's called behemoth tamei. And now you find milk. What's the status of that milk? The Rambam says muteres. It's mamish like fine tenoifus. If you find excrement, it's not royal achila. And b'chlal, that's the klal. Anything that's not royal achila, really. Even not on the level of Pesach, they were more machmad. There it has to be nifsala machila skelev. Here, if it's nifsala machila sodom, it's not a not midoy rice. It's not a problem. Lefikach now muter lahamed became ashchita sanachri ubecame as beimachayot meya. I know when people read it, I read it. I was trying to figure out what are we talking about. The Rambam is not talking about putting it in the cave. We're speaking about using that milk, the milk that's found in it. That milk is called a tenoifus. When the animal was dead, when we milk the behemoth tamei when it's alive, guys, we learned that after it's dead, if that milk is used, then it's okay. That's the oid hakeva. That's what the Rambam makes it clear.
How do you use the milk without consuming it? Straight milk.
No. We're saying that if they kill a non-kosher animal died, I don't care how it died.
Yeah.
If you remove the milk and you take those enzymes and you make them into a starter, it's mamash mutter. That's it. But if you use the flesh itself, that's problematic. It's bottled. This is the placenta of the donkey. Here also we view it like perish. It's like excrement. However, there are certain hides that they are edible. Only if they are still soft. Which hides are that? Either oid adam. Now, by the way, oid adam, God forbid, we learned in today's Pedic base. It's awesome in a toida. Lava b'michlal hasei. You're not going to be chayv malchus. Whatever the isur of the basar goes to that because it's soft. V'oid chazir, if the chazir is a domesticated pig. V'oid chatoides, the hump of the gumel. What's a gumel? A gumel is a horse that was created by a committee. They say they became a camel. V'oid chatoides of gumel shaloi to'an all of masa ma'olam. So that's why it's soft. V'lo yigia l'masa shadayni raka. And any skin of any genital area of all behemoths and chayes. The skin that's under the tail. From the following creatures. The anaka, the koyach, the alta, the choymet. The point is, called elo ha'oids. When they are soft, they have a din of basar. Now that we mentioned some of the shmeina shratzim, also when it comes to conveying tumah, final halacha base. What's the shayran niskol? Any animal. The Torah just did a cost of bohayim. Any animal, any bird, if they killed a person, it says lo yeyachal psari. Now hold on. Of course, lo yeyachal psari. If the Torah is telling you got to stone it to death, which means it didn't go through shchita, it should be included in the isur of nevela. Hey, that since once based in Paskins, you got to stone that creature. Now, Nesar, the Nasik, the Basar Behema, meaning that even if someone went ahead and wrongfully, they shechted it, you may not eat it. Now, on top of that, not only may you not eat it, Hareza also, Asr and the Im Achli Basari Kazais Loika, Chenkishi Yisakal Asr doesn't only mean you're going to get the Hana of eating. If you sell it, even if you're feeding it to your dogs or giving it to goyim, that's the meaning. Lo yei ochel psarei. However, coming back to this din of excrement, even by the Shana Niskol, that is also on the level of Asur Bahano, Uperes, Shal Shreid HaNiskol, yes, Mutter Bahano. Now what happens? So what happened is that they paskened the animal has to be put to death. They stoned it to death. And then something came about and retroactively it became known. They gave an erroneous psak din. How can that be? For example, the Eidim became Zoimimim.
It wasn't stoned.
So if it wasn't stoned yet, even though there was a psak din, it retroactively makes it mutter. No, it's chulin gemurin. You can put it back on your hurt. And if you only found out that there was an erroneous psak din, let's say after shenifkal, say that. He's saying mutter bano because if you stoned it to death, it's now an avela. But at least it's like any other avela that mutter bano, not asur bano. Givaldik, have to be continued.
So Rabbi, what about the humans that want to eat their placentas? A lot of these women.
The humans that want to eat the
What does that
placentas,
fall under?
perish ba'alma.
Because we said the afterbirth of the animal is not really, it's